Good evening. I am the Duchess of Darkness. Sit back and relax as I narrate the stories of your nightmares. Hello, Henry, by CallinNWPod. My mother died about 3 hours ago. She was on her way home from work when she was struck by a car in a hit and run. My father was friends with the local police chief, who called him as soon as he had visual confirmation my mother was dead. My father decided it'd be best if I was left here at the house while he went to confirm what had happened. Let me say, sitting alone at home, waiting for my mother to come home, knowing she never would again, probably not the best way to leave your child. Grief does work in mysterious ways, and my father was likely attempting to protect me from seeing what would likely have fed my nightmares. Sitting in the living room, I decided that sitting in silence wasn't going to be doing me any favors. I turned on the TV and started watching one of those generic superhero movies. You know the ones, filled with unnecessary jokes, overly drawn-out action sequences, those types of films. The perfect distraction, I thought, something to take my mind off. I heard a chime on my phone. Opening it up, I saw a text sent from an unknown number. Assuming my father had just left his phone at home, he was prone to do that, I opened it up, expecting to see a text, letting me know he'd be home soon with news. However, instead, I was greeted with a picture message. Puzzled, I downloaded a picture and was greeted with a picture of my mom. She was facing away from the camera, standing on the sidewalk, seemingly walking towards the neighboring parking garage from her work. The image was zoomed in on her, but I could just make out the edges of a vehicle's inspection tags in one of the upper corners. I was confused, thinking that maybe it was my dad texting me to let me know my mother was okay, and he was just pulling up to pick her up when I received another picture from the same number. This time, I nearly passed out in fear. On the ground lay my mother, her arm bent at a weird angle, with red blood pouring from a gash in her skull. Her hair was matted and sticky with the liquid. Her shirt was torn. If she wasn't dead when it was taken, she would have been soon. I had received confirmation that my mother was dead in the worst way possible, by seeing her from the killer's point of view. I immediately went to dial 911 when a third text chimed. On the screen, I saw it was an actual text. All it said was, "Hello, Henry." A moment later, my door opened, and my father returned home, his face gaunt. I told him what I had received, nearly yelling in anger and fright, questioning him why he had sent me the pictures. He replied that he had his phone the entire time, proving it by pulling it out and showing it to me. I responded by showing him the picture sent to me. He took my phone and immediately called his friend, the police chief, to send an officer out to us. I was in hysterics and decided to return to my room, having had quite enough of the pain the emotions brought. Lying in bed, crying, I heard a voice say, "Hello, Henry. Is your mama home?" Frightened, I looked around my room and couldn't find the source of the voice. Thinking back on it, the voice had sounded a little bit garbly, almost like it was a phone on speaker or playing through a Bluetooth speaker. I turned to look at my radio. Sure enough, the light was green. It was connected to something. I quickly stood and went to turn it off. But then, "If you turn off the speaker, I will break into your house and kill you." I was frozen in place. Fear welled up on my chest. As I waited, unsure how to proceed, the voice returned. "Good. Sit back down on your bed." I did as I was told. I looked at the door to my room, hoping to God my father would hear what was happening. No such luck. "Do you want to play a game?" "No," I replied. "Leave me alone." "I'm afraid I can't do that, Henry. We're going to play a game of hide and seek. In about 3 minutes, I'm going to find you and kill you. If you aren't hiding in a safe spot, then I will kill you and your father. Time's wasting. Better hurry." The Bluetooth speaker began counting down. I ran from my room and went looking for my father. I couldn't find him anywhere. Knowing I was running out of time, I quickly grabbed a knife and went into the bathroom upstairs. I hid in the shower, having locked the door. I heard the chime of my Bluetooth speaker going off. For 2 minutes it played repeatedly. I heard my father walk into my bedroom to turn it off, but I also heard the telling creak of the hardwood floor just outside my bathroom. Someone else was in the house with me and my dad. My dad called out my name, but by then the door to the bathroom had swung open, and standing in the silhouette was a tall man in a dark outfit, mask and all. "Hello, Henry," he said. He walked into the bathroom and smiled. I was too scared to make a noise. He had me trapped. I knew I could have called out for my dad for help, but the only sound out of my lips was a frightening gasp as the man walked towards me. He was a foot away from me, a knife in his hand, and was savoring the moment. My dad walked up and saw him standing there. He lunged for the man and knocked the knife from his hands, struggling with him on the bathroom floor. I quickly grabbed the knife and watched in absolute horror as my father struggled with the man before he fell unconscious. My father helped me out of the shower and immediately called for the cops. Within minutes, an officer ran up the stairs and handcuffed the man before he regained consciousness. A short time later, the police chief arrived with several more officers, all there to take the man into custody. On the man, they found my mother's ID and phone, as well as another phone which he had used to send me the pictures. During the investigation, it came out that the man was the widowed father of a young boy my mother had failed to save during a cardiac arrest the year prior. The man who had spent the last year plotting his revenge had seen my mother walking away from the hospital she'd worked at and had run her down. Having realized killing her wasn't enough, he wanted my father to feel the same pain he had gone through, having lost both a wife and a son. The man was taken away and jailed. To this day, 2 words still haunt my every nightmare. Hello, Henry. The Curse of the Gray Wolf, written by the Prowler. My great-grandfather came from a small Rhode Island town, a town that has a dark chapter in its past, and a story that has been passed from generation to generation in my family. Now it is up to me to pass on this tale. It started one autumn morning in a small farming community in northern Rhode Island. There was a nip in the air, and old Zachary Johnson could feel winter's chill move through the valley. He was the only dairy farmer in the village, and he was making his daily delivery rounds from store to store and house to house. It was a quiet morning, calm and peaceful, no delays in his deliveries, until he reached the outskirts of the village, where he came upon Ben Jacobs' farm, one of the new sheep farmers that just moved into the valley. At first glance, there was nothing wrong. Zachary fetched a daily ration of milk from the wagon, opened the front gate, walked to the front door, and knocked twice. No answer. "Good morning, Jacobs family," Zachary yelled. Still no response. Zachary was puzzled. This is a working farm, he thought, and it's morning. Where is everybody? So he walked around to the back of the house to see if Ben and his boys were out tending to their sheep, or if Mrs. Jacobs was in the back tending to her chores, and just couldn't hear him. But when Zachary turned the corner, he discovered a sight that would stick with him for the rest of his life. It was Mrs. Jacobs he happened upon first, lying dead in the back porch doorway. Her throat had been ripped open. Blood was strewn all across the back porch. Zachary's boots stuck to the floorboards. "My God, he thought, who or what could have done this? Zachary looked to the right, towards the field where the sheep grazed. He saw a child's body by the fence line. As he rushed towards the body, he saw it was Danny, Jacob's youngest son. Same injuries as his mother, not a drop of blood in him. Couldn't be. Zachary climbed over the wooden fence to search for Ben and his oldest son Billy. When he got to the top of the grassy knoll, he saw them, Ben, Billy, and all their sheep, scattered across their field, all dead from the same injuries. Their throats had been ripped out, drained of blood, the sheep included. Zachary was terrified. He tried to compose himself as best he could and ran to his wagon, got in and rode as quickly as he could into town and got the sheriff. Zachary told him everything he saw, and they rode back to the farm to investigate. The sheriff had never seen such carnage. Nothing like this had ever happened in his sleepy little town. He investigated the body of Mrs. Jacobs first. As he lifted her chin and saw the gaping wound, he realized he had seen this kind of injury before. It's an animal bite, he thought. The sheriff looked around the body to see if he could notice anything else, and just off the porch, he looked at the ground and saw a perfectly preserved paw print in the mud, a wolf print to be exact. It had rained the entire night before, so there was a clear, muddy track of paw prints, from body to body, from the back porch to the youngest boy by the fence, then to Ben and Billy and the sheep in the field. "Wolves!" the sheriff shouted. Zachary, who was knelt by the side of the house feeling nauseous, looked up and said, "What was that, Sheriff?" "Wolves!" the sheriff shouted again. "This family was killed by wolves." "I can't believe I didn't notice that before," Zachary said. "That's all right, Zach. You were probably in too much of a panic to notice paw prints," said the sheriff. Zachary nodded and said, "But we've never had wolf attacks around here before." "That's true," the sheriff said, "but we also haven't had farms out this far into the valley either, until recently." The sheriff noted. "The Jacobs family have been here, what, a year?" asked the sheriff. "Yes," Zachary said. "And the Benjamin family next door? About a little less than that, correct?" the sheriff asked again. Zachary nodded in agreement. "The point is, Zachary, the further we impede into their land, the greater risk there is for this type of thing to happen," said the sheriff. The two men finished their conversation, then got into Zachary's wagon and headed back into town to fetch the undertaker. The bodies of the Jacobs family were retrieved, and a meeting of the town elders was taking place. Their decision to hunt down and kill any wolf in the valley. The elders wanted to keep expanding past the village and couldn't afford any more families to be massacred. They hired 4 of the best hunters in town and offered them a reward for every dead wolf they brought back. It took 2 years for the hunters to complete their task, and made quite a profit in doing it. There were no wolves left in the valley by the time they were done. In the winter of the next year, strange deaths started to occur again across the land. Every farm across the valley had lost at least one animal. A cow, a chicken, sheep, even the farmers' dogs weren't safe. The strange thing about these deaths were there were no puncture wounds, no bites or lacerations, but the bodies were completely drained of blood, and a single pair of wolf prints were found by the bodies in the freshly fallen snow. So the hunters were called upon yet again. They met the night before in the tavern to discuss a plan. There was Jonathan Benjamin, the owner of the farm next to the Jacobs family, his brother Samuel Benjamin, and Walter Birch, an old fur trapper who lived in a cabin up in the hills. And finally there was Bill Toombs, who ran the general store. The plan they came up with was to meet at Walter's cabin and go from there. They said goodnight and agreed to meet in the morning. Bill met Jonathan and Samuel at their house and rode up to Walter's cabin. It was a cold and snowy day. The hollow wind echoed through the air. A blizzard was approaching. The men hurried to the cabin, and as they got closer, they could make out 2 objects lying on the ground near the entrance to the cabin. When they reached the cabin, they saw the 2 objects. It was Walter and his dog Buckshot, both lying in a pool of blood, completely drained, No wounds, no marks of any kind. The men were terrified. They rode out in great haste, back into town, telling whoever would listen what had happened. The town was in a panic. Rumors started to spread that the town was cursed for what they had done to the wolves. The elders tried to set the town at ease, and they went about their daily lives for now. 2 days later, though, fears struck again when Bill Toombs was found dead in the back of his general store, sitting upright in his chair with a blanket up to his chin next to the fireside. He had died the same mysterious way as the others, drained of blood with no visible wounds. Except a strange thing about his death was all the doors were locked and the windows shut, and a shotgun propped up right next to his chair, and a trail of snowy wolf prints that led from the door to the window, then tracks outside in the snow. Well, needless to say, the Benjamin brothers were spooked. They were the last of the hunters left alive. They believed a ghost wolf was after them for all the killing they had done in the last 2 years. And the townspeople were starting to believe it too, especially anyone who witnessed Bill's death in the general store. The Benjamin brothers continued to live in fear, always armed, always paranoid. But as week after week passed and nothing happened, the fear started to dissipate in the village, and Christmas was fast approaching. The rumors and fear died down, and the townspeople were getting into the festive spirit. Then on the morning of Christmas Eve, the dairy farmer Zachary was making his last deliveries before Christmas. His last stop was the Benjamin farm. The sky started to get dark. It looked like rain, so Zachary hurried off his wagon, grabbed the 2 pails of milk, and hurried to the front door. He could see the glow through the windows from the fireplace. He knocked on the door, no answer. He knocked again, still nothing. "Jonathan? Samuel? You home?" Zachary said, still no answer. He moved to the right of the door to peek through the window. He could see 2 people sitting on the ground in front of the fireplace, next to the Christmas tree, holding each other. Zachary tried the door handle. He turned it, and it opened. Unlocked, he thought, as he opened the door. As he approached the 2 bodies, he could tell something wasn't right. They were stiff as a board, holding each other. And it was cold in the room. But how, he thought? The fireplace seems like it was just lit. The fire was raging. He looked down at his feet, and there sat Jonathan and Samuel, holding each other. Complete fear gripped their faces. They looked frozen in pain. Blood was all around them, on the floors, walls, even on the Christmas tree. A rifle was in each of their laps. Neither had fired a shot. Just a trail of bloody paw prints around the room and out the back door into the snow. People would say they could hear a lone wolf howl late at night when the moon was full. After the last of the hunters had died, some say they even saw it, gray fur with pale blue eyes. Either way, not too long after the final deaths, the wolf was never seen or heard from again. And the man who passed the story down through the generations in my family was Zachary, the dairy farmer, a story that no one in my family will ever forget. I Love Search Parties by Budget Round 3720. This kind of thing just doesn't happen in a small town like ours. I was just a common traffic cop a few months ago, before the killings began. Prior to this unprecedented stretch of brutality, a DUI was headline news around these parts. But now, with the body count into double digits, it's become all hands on deck to stop the perpetrator and end the violence. Everybody in town is on edge. For the first time, people are having to lock doors and abide by a mandated curfew. None of the precautions ever work, though. This killer is smart, crafty, and has eluded radar, hiding in plain sight amongst the population. One of the reasons it's been so difficult to catch this killer is due to their expertise in disposing of evidence. Despite the remains of all 10 persons being found, there has been no footprints, no tire tracks, no hair or fingerprints. I should have clarified remains a bit more. Skeletons have been found in each discovery. That's because the killer has perfected the craft of completely skinning and disposing of the victim's flesh and organs. I've heard rumors around the precinct that investigators suspect it's the work of a hunter, but here in the sticks, that narrows it down to just about everybody. Despite the terror that has set in our little town the past few months, I still see the good and humanity in our people. Whenever another resident goes missing at the grips of this monster, the whole town rallies, and our search parties swell in numbers. Family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all joining as one and not succumbing to the fear. I personally love the search parties. Not to sound too disturbing, but I get a little excited when news spreads of another missing person. The search parties allow me to do something meaningful with my life, and I really enjoy talking to different town folks and learning about their lives and backstories. I always hope that nobody finds remains right away, so we can have a couple more days all together until the next one. Being around these people so intimately allows me to see them in a different light and learn things I would have never known. Like how old cranky Miss Smith used to be a world-class horse rider, or Mr. Weaver having the ability to speak 6 languages. My personal favorite, though, is how reclusive Mr. Wright happens to be a world-class caliber chef. The homemade beef stew he distributes at every search party is to die for.